There we go. All right.
There we go. Got it.
Let me add people in here. All right, it's preparing to go live. We'll give it a second. Says it is live streaming, but there we go. Okay. Awesome. Welcome everyone to the June M5 Mastermind session. If you haven't been paying attention all year, what we are doing every single month here in 2023 is bringing in people to talk about topics that you all want to learn more about, things that'll be super helpful. We've talked about mindset, we've talked about hormones, we've talked about cycles, we've talked about spinal alignment, we've talked about all sorts of things. If you need any of those replays, go ahead and shoot me a message. They are all on YouTube. So if you just search my channel, you can find them all on YouTube. But I'm happy to send you a specific one if you can't seem to find it. But this M5 Mastermind session is with Christina Hathaway. We're talking all about master emotional eating, which again is another super important topic that a lot of people struggle with, and she is the expert and she's going to give us so much good information. But before we dive in, I do have one more announcement. We are making, as the M5 framework, we are making a huge announcement tomorrow. We have been working on something for months, literally months. And we are going to be announcing it tomorrow. So all of that to say is stay tuned, keep an eye out. I am super excited for it. We put a lot of time and effort into this, and it's to really help a lot of people. And it will help a lot of people. I'm sure of it. So we are going to dive right in. This is Christina Hathaway. So a little bit about her and her company. She is the owner and CEO of the Mindset of Matter. The team at the Mindset of Matter is dedicated to helping clients rebuild relationships with their bodies and food. And it is led obviously by Christina. The team themselves leverage their extensive knowledge in health and fitness and mindset to create lasting change for their clients. Christina herself, she holds her master's in advanced study of marriage and family therapy from Arizona State University. She has received specialized training in food and body obsession from the National Eating Disorder Association and other nationally recognized organizations. In addition, Christina has completed the National Academy of Sports Medicine certification for personal training and nutrition coaching. She is a certified women's coaching specialist through Girls Gone Strong and holds a hormone specialist certification from Nutritional Coaching Institute. Christina, as a coach, she is described by her clients as constructively blunt with a side of sweet empowerment. With her background as a licensed therapist, she excels in identifying underlying struggles beyond surface content and helping clients overcome barriers to their health and wellness goals. She integrates her profound understanding of human behavior with evidence-based training methods in nutrition and movement. Christina facilitates profound and lasting transformation in her clients' lives. Her own fitness journey started way back when she was only 3 years old with dance, her first dance steps. As a competitive dancer and later a member of the Arizona State University dance team, she developed a deep appreciation for caring for both the body and the mind. Despite her own personal challenges with body dysmorphia, Christina has cultivated a compassionate, self-loving, and self-respecting relationship with herself, which she now shares with her clients. So at the Mindset of Matter, Christina and her team offer a unique and transformative 3-phase coaching program. This coaching program addresses the emotional and cognitive and physical aspects of well-being, guiding clients on a journey of healing from within and creating lasting and sustainable change. Coaching is a profound calling for Christina. It blends her passions for fitness, nutrition, and that compassionate caregiving. Her mission is to guide clients in discovering their internal and external strength, empowering them to become the best version of themselves. So together with Christina and her clients, they embark on a journey of self-discovery, transformation, and personal growth. So at this point, I've talked far too much. I'm going to hand it over to Christina. She is going to present. She has a slide deck for us, and we will have time for Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, hold on to them until the end. But take it away, Christina.
Well, thank you so much for the lovely introduction. I appreciate everyone who is watching here on Zoom. There it goes, as well as on Facebook. And so today I am going to be talking about mastering emotional eating. And I know for a lot of people out there, you know, this is very much a very deep struggle for them, and what tends to stand in their way when it comes to their health and wellness goals. They try to think their way through it, what I should do, but they always hit this barrier of some sort. And for a lot of people, they recognize the barrier, but they don't understand why they do it. And so they just think, maybe if I'm a little bit more disciplined, maybe if I can be more consistent, maybe if I fill in the blank, right? And so today we're really going to go through not just what is emotional eating, how it manifests from our upbringing, the science behind it, but then we'll go into very practical, easy to follow steps so that you can begin to get a hold of that emotional eating pattern and, you know, eventually get to that place where you're feeling in control of your body and your relationship with food. And so I'm just going to dive right in. So first and foremost, we want to define emotional eating and again, discuss how it manifests. And so I'll just let you guys know when I present, I do read off of my slides and then I'll go on little tangents. So if you want to take any screenshots, you can, because it'll be on the slides for a second. So emotional eating refers to the tendency to eat or overeat in response to emotional triggers. These triggers include stress, boredom, sadness, anxiety, even happiness or feeling proud of yourself. I hear a lot of times, well, I deserved it. I wanted to feel good about X, Y, and Z accomplishment. People who engage in emotional eating, they use food as a way to soothe or cope with their emotions rather than addressing the underlying emotional issues head on. It's often characterized by craving a specific types of comfort foods, such as high calorie or sugary foods, rather than consuming food for nourishment and hunger and satisfaction. Today, I actually had a discussion with a client because she said, you know, she had like a tuna sandwich and a side for lunch. And then she went to the grocery store and she said, you know, I really wanted something sweet. And the thing that she chose, a bear claw, only came in packs of 6. So she bought the pack of 6. Unfortunately, she ate 4 out of the 6, right? And I said, okay, I want you to recognize the difference between and she also said there had to be a specific type of food. I said, you know, why didn't you choose something else? You know, we went down that rabbit hole. And, you know, we sat there and explained to her like the difference between hunger and appetite, right? In that hunger, if we say, hey, would a piece of chicken or broccoli help in this pain that you have, hunger pain? And you say yes, then we know that that's true physical hunger. But in her case, only that bear claw was to help her feel better. And so we know that's that emotional eating side of thing, or emotional appetite. Emotional eating, again, can create that temporary sense of relief or comfort, but it typically doesn't address what's going on deep down inside, whether that's feelings of guilt, shame, regret, whatever that is. It oftentimes, too, creates more of those feelings after we engage in that behavior. So while occasional emotional eating is relatively common, you know, there's days where, you know, you're just tired and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to grab that easy thing and eat it. But it's when it becomes, when we do that, it's not necessarily problematic, but it's the frequency of it and the, you know, how excessive the behavior is can contribute to things like weight gain, obesity, and then of course, negative effects on your overall well-being. And so I want to walk you guys through some scenarios where does emotional eating come from? Now, I am going to be talking about things in regards to the past. For some of you, this may be triggering. So if you need any support, you know, just let us know. But just know that we are going to be talking about some past experiences, and they all stem from invalidating environments. So, oops, I went the wrong way. So in invalidating environments, emotional eating is influenced by factors such as suppressed emotional expression, lack of support, and difficulties in emotional regulation. Another big part of this too is trauma. I want to acknowledge that physical and sexual abuse can definitely be a trigger to emotional eating. We don't talk about that in detail here, but I want to acknowledge that that definitely is a part of that. The belief that emotions are invalid or unworthy leads to decrease or increase the stress and reduce coping with that stress. To compensate emotionally, we disconnect, we turn to food, and we look for that food as a means of self-soothing and self-comfort. Emotional eating becomes maladaptive. And I want to say maladaptive versus adaptive skills, where an adaptive coping skill helps us grow, helps us heal. A maladaptive coping skill keeps us stuck, right? So emotional eating becomes a maladaptive strategy, offering only temporary relief and a temporary sense of control. Negative impacts on self-worth and body image further drive emotional eating as individuals seek to temporary feel that boost in their self-esteem and or escape from that negative thought and emotion. And so over the next few slides, I'm going to talk about how our emotional experience, what it's like when we come out of these invalidating environments, what is our experience in those environments themselves. And the first one is emotional expression suppression. There's a term called alexithymia, which we are seeing in research as being one of the main contributors to emotional eating. And alexithymia is basically not having the awareness of what's going on emotionally. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about here are portions of that. And the first one, again, is just suppressing your emotional experience. In environments where you were discouraged or invalidated to express your emotions, a person may hold their feelings in or interpret them as wrong or unimportant. Consequently, individuals may internalize the belief that their emotions are not valid or they shouldn't be expressed or they should be suppressed. This emotional suppression can lead to increased emotional distress and a reduced ability to just cope with life. We have to remember that our emotions are part of our humanness. We are human because we have these emotions. You know, I do believe my dog also has emotions, so let's just talk about that on another slide. But as humans, that's what separates us: the love, the sadness, the anger, all of that is a part of our experience. Emotional eating then becomes a way to numb that experience and distract us from these validating emotions. So number one, if we come from an environment where, say that our families, and this is something that I experience with my clients, we put on a happy face, pretty girl smile, they're always happy, they're always good. And so if that's the message I'm getting, then I'm suppressing that emotional reality, that truth for me, because mom says, put a smile on, like be a happy girl, whatever that is, right? Emotional expression, the suppression of it can also look like having a parent who is maybe not telling you directly to do that, but indirectly you're watching them not talk about their emotions, not expressing their emotions, or they only express certain emotions. And so you learn that certain emotions are okay to express and others you must suppress. The lack of emotional support. So in invalidating environments, individuals may not receive the emotional support they need when experiencing distressing emotions. They can feel isolated, unheard, or dismissed when seeking comfort or understanding. Without adequate emotional support, individuals may turn to food as a substitute for emotional connection or as means for self-soothing. Again, food provides that temporary relief. I know for me, my mom had a really hard time expressing herself. She lost her mom when I was 6. She went in a very deep depression. She became very uncomfortable with my own childhood feelings. She would almost laugh when I would get uncomfortable, and it would make me feel very angry at her because I was having this childhood experience, right? And so for a long time, I really struggled with how to express myself because I didn't have the support of someone saying like, your emotions are valid. It's okay. These are big feelings. Let's sit through those feelings. Now, of course, I'm a therapist, so that's how I talk. You with your children will talk differently, but she never taught me that. So I never learned the skills until I was much older and went through my own experience to express myself and know that it was okay and know how to do it. I just felt very invalidated in those moments. And I'll tell you, when you feel invalidated, you almost become like, okay, my emotions don't matter. I need to take care of her emotions, right? And so that was another part of it. This goes with it, emotional difficulties with just regulating in general. And invalidating environments may contribute to difficulties in emotional regulation, When individuals are consistently invalidated or their emotional experiences are disregarded, they may struggle with developing healthy coping skills to regulate their emotions effectively. Whether that is teaching your kid to, I love when parents are like, okay, let's take a deep breath, or, I see a lot of kids with like sensory stuff that they can work with, and just really helping them sit with that feeling in their body. I think nowadays we're definitely leaning towards more of this, emotional awareness, especially with our children. But back in the day, I'm 40, so back in the day that wasn't a thing. So it was kind of like, that idea of like, I'll give you something to cry about, or whatever the little comments were. Yeah, it's like it was very much, well, I am crying, I feel sad. No one's telling me how to handle this thing, right? No one's giving me the let's take a deep breath, like let's slow it down. Like I know this is a big feeling and we're gonna get through it, which we'll talk about later. So again, eating becomes that maladaptive strategy or coping skill to help us with that. And then of course, self-worth and body image issues. So invalidation can also negatively impact our own self-worth. I want to stop at self-worth because this is something that people don't realize, is that when we're told that our emotion, our reality, so when we talk about reality in my practice, it is your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions. It's the stuff going on inside of you that nobody else gets to tell you is wrong, because it's your own reality. Now, as children, we're very spontaneous with those thoughts. We're imperfect with our thoughts. We're very vulnerable in our thinking. And we're kind of like, we're almost allowed to like be defiant. Like we're kids, right? And if a parent, again, is constantly telling you you're wrong, what will happen is you'll never feel like you're right. So you begin to not trust yourself. You'll begin to feel worthless unless other people or things are validating you. That then turns into body image, where we see that, I need to look a certain way, I need to act a certain way, I need to fit in a certain size, and it all stems, all is a big mess together. But just to finish this slide, that constant criticism or invalidation regarding one's appearance or weight can lead to body dissatisfaction and a negative relationship with food. Emotional eating may be used as a means to temporarily boost self-esteem or escape negative body image or thoughts. I do see, especially with my trauma victims, that they will also use food to feel full. They'll feel full, so they don't have to feel the emotion. So there are a lot of ways that emotional eating is there to help us. It helps us survive in certain moments, right? If I don't know how to navigate my emotions, but I'm an emotional person, I need to figure out a way to do this. And so for a lot of you who are watching this, you're like, why can't I stop this? I want you to acknowledge that this was something that helped you survive. And survive is such a dramatic word, but for some of you, that's a very true thing. But it helped you get through these hard moments. So I want to acknowledge that you didn't know any better, so you couldn't do any better. And so now this, moving forward, we want to learn how to recreate those patterns. But I just want to go into a little bit more around the science, like what's actually happening in our head. I think it's really important to note that there's actually a physiological response that occurs to give you a little sense of like validation, like I'm not going crazy, I'm not out of control. And so food, even the anticipation of eating, triggers a release of dopamine from our brains. And this is a very powerful chemical signal, a neurotransmitter that our brain produces to make us feel good. And so there are a lot of triggers that release dopamine. Falling in love is one of them, accomplishing a goal. But then we have things like eating sugar or sweets or foods that are very hyper palatable, gambling, smoking cigarettes, doing drugs, and so forth. In bad times, we actually suppress that dopamine, making the desire for it even stronger when the effects are more impactful. And so the more we're feeling out of control of our emotions, the more we're feeling a sense of self-worth, the more we're feeling terrible about our bodies, we have this suppression of dopamine, which only makes us want it more. The only bad thing about that is that good feel in our brain isn't the same from one experience to the next. And so the same amount of sugar that would help you feel good one day is not going to be true for you a year from that day if you continue this behavior. So we have to increase the amount of food, sugar, whatever it is, to have a higher dopamine hit. And so this is how addictive behavior develops. Now, I want you to recognize that a lot of people will say, I'm addicted to food. You're addicted to the dopamine hit. You're addicted to feeling good. Okay, there's a big difference there. We are addicted to what it offers us, not to the actual thing, because I guarantee if I put a bag of sugar in front of your face, you're not going to eat it. But if I put a bear claw in front of your face, you will eat it. And so we're not addicted to sugar. So I just want to clarify that in that slide. So whatever the specific situation, the common element is to how the events led to the physiological sensations that felt difficult to tolerate or even felt unbearable. So what do I mean by that? It's like, what was it? What were the triggers that led up to you feeling or not feeling a certain way? Again, common experiences are hurt, anger, happiness, which people are like, what? Shame, hopelessness, anxiety, and or desire. And like I said, pride. I see that a lot where women specifically really have a hard time with feeling good about themselves, even when they've accomplished something. So rather than sitting with this sense of pride and happiness, they'll turn to food. So then they can say, oh, I ate this thing, it made me feel good, when really you should have just felt good in yourself, right? So instead of regulating emotions, we turn to emotional or binge eating when emotions feel too intense to modulate, tolerate, or otherwise manage, which we talked about. I want to just move on from that because this is something you guys can definitely screenshot, because it just kind of puts it in perspective of like how this happens, like what is the cycle that occurs in our brains. And so you can see in A, we have that prompting or triggering event in the environment, whether this is a feeling of shame because of something someone said, or like I said, when you've accomplished something, but just really struggle with feeling good about you doing something well. And then that again, so that's a triggering event. Then we have that dysregulated emotion, right? So I have this emotion, I shouldn't be dysregulated. I have an emotion that I don't know how to regulate. When I think of dysregulation, I think, yes, you're in this frantic state, but really it's, I'm having an emotion and I don't know what to do with it. So then because we don't know what to do with it, we have this attempt to avoid and escape that emotional experience. Food comes into play. We get that dopamine hit and find that temporary relief. But what happens, and what we're going to talk about now, is that afterwards, that aftershock kind of shame spiral that occurs that then brings you back to that shameful place. And so in the long run, when we turn to food as an escape for these emotions, we actually can begin to feel this battle in our brain. So when we emotionally eat, we get that light up in our brain in the pleasure center, right, which is our hippocampus, and that dopamine release shortly after. But because we know like this is not contributing to my goals, this is not making me feel better long term, I feel out of control of food, whatever it is, we're using this logic in our prefrontal cortex. And we are reminding ourselves like what we're doing actually has consequences. So we have this pleasure center of our brain saying like, yes, more. We have this logic center of our brain saying, no, stop. And to become this kind of like toxic, abusive relationship where we just feel freaking crazy, right? And so for you guys, I really want you to think about, and you can take this, and if you did have an emotional eating experience, say this weekend or whenever it is, I want you to walk yourself through this. You can take a screenshot, and I just ask you some questions here. So you can either describe a recent episode, or if something happens in the future, just walk yourself through it, because as we'll learn, that awareness to how we're triggered, that awareness to the experiences we have and emotions we have is how we get through this. And so I'll just give you guys a chance if you want to take a screenshot, and I'll have some water. Awesome. All right. So we talked about the science, we talked about the psychology. Now, while you're here, the steps to mastering this. Now, we consider and talk about all of those two things that we just went over in detail. But for the interest of saving time, let's talk about how do we push through. And I want to talk about a concept that I find with my clients is this thinking your way through this process. I hear so many times, like I said in the intro, I know how to do this. I know what I should be doing. We're using our logic and reasoning to try to change your behavior, right? Which in some cases, that's, yes, we can do that, it's possible. However, in this case, especially with someone who struggles with their emotional experience, we have to feel our way through it. Until we do that, we will not seek change. And I have a funny story. I have a client who has a PhD in behavior change. That's her job. She's seeing me because she's tried to behavior change her way through this for 30 years. This, what I'm going to walk you through, is exactly what I used with her. She has not had an emotional or binge eating experience since before January. She has been able to intuitively eat. She's been able to also see weight loss through that process. And she's not even near where she wanted to be, what she thought a goal weight would be. She's just so confident in herself because she's so connected to her emotional experience and just what's going on internally, that she feels so much better in her body, even at a weight that before this process she would say, like, I'm disgusting, or feel a lot of shame up. So this is exactly what I did with her and hundreds of other women. We mostly work with women, and then the husbands tend to come along with them. So increasing emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence plays a crucial role in understanding and addressing emotional eating patterns. We want to reframe those patterns in ways in which we respond to emotions that stem from childhood experiences. Emotional eating is, again, that tendency to cope and regulate with those emotions rather than addressing the underlying issues. By developing emotional intelligence, individuals can become more aware of the emotion, understand their triggers, and learn healthier ways to manage and express their feelings. Here is some emotional intelligence. Basically, this is a tool that I made up myself. I tend to say stupid stuff and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I make tools up. So this is the recognize, ride, and recover. And so the just to give you some background on this, is we used to talk about this in regards to like mindfulness and distress tolerance from a dialectical behavioral therapy point of view, but it got very buddy and overwhelming with a lot of information. It was like 10,000 steps to get there. And I'm like, dude, I would never do that. Like, that's too much for me. And so I just wanted to, I like to create little bite-sized, simplistic ways for people to start this process. And so recognize, by recognizing, acknowledging your emotions, you unlock the power to understand them. Without awareness, we can't create change, right? If we're constantly on autopilot and we don't actually stop, figure out what the heck is going on, we're always going to continue in the same pattern. And so the self-awareness allows you to gain valuable insights into your emotional landscape. And so ways we do that is becoming mindful. Mindfulness is that state of present moment awareness to recognize and name the emotions as they arise, observing and identifying the thoughts and sensations associated with each. And so it's taking that step back as if you are an observer to your own emotional experience. Being able to, for some of you, you literally may have to print out an emotional chart, right? With all the little faces, like I used to give the kids in therapy, right? Some of you literally don't know what it means, right? You just have felt it. It's your comfort zone, right? And so by being able to say, okay, and I did this today, I was very stressed out this morning, and I was like, okay, taking a shower. I was like, I felt stress in my heart because I felt it right here, and like put my hand on it. I was like, I'm feeling very stressed. And I'm not even shitting you. Like, just by doing that, my body went, it was the greatest thing. And I do this shit all the time. So it's like you would think, but it was just another reminder, like, acknowledge, like, stop trying to outwork it, out feel it, out eat it, just acknowledge. So, and then reflect and understand, taking time to explore the root causes, or that moment, like what was going on, the patterns behind the emotions. By understanding the context and triggers, you can develop a greater self-awareness and gain insights into that experience. And so recognize, I like to say your emotions are like, you're the blue sky, and your emotions are the clouds that come by, right? We may just have a sunny day and we're content, or we're happy. Those are two different emotions. But happiness is an emotion, and every emotion, as we'll talk about, has a beginning, middle, and end. And so one, this dark cloud might come over and you're just like watching them go by. And so that's recognized. The next one is ride. And this is my favorite. So ride in this phase of developing emotional intelligence or resilience is allowing yourself to ride through the discomfort of the emotion by recognizing that every emotion has a natural beginning, middle, and end. You build confidence in your ability to navigate and endure emotional experience. This process enables personal growth and fosters resilience. So I like to think of it as a wave, right? Our emotions are this big wave. And we're always trying to avoid that top or that crescendo of that wave. We think, I had a client tell me today, she goes, I just know when I made mistakes, like my dad would get really angry with me and I get very fearful. She's never actually sat through that fear. In her brain, she's going to get in trouble because when she was little, she got in trouble. But I said, you need to remind yourself, and I go into the whole theory, and that little girl, she's no longer unsafe. She no longer has to fear. And we need to teach her how to sit through that fear, because once she gets on the other side, more times than not, we're like, that wasn't that bad. I handled that well, right? Because we have to realize we're in a mature brain handling these emotions, whereas when we learned or did not learn about our emotional experience, we were in immature brain. So again, embrace discomfort. Discomfort creates change. There's no other way through it. Instead of avoiding or suppressing emotions, we ride through them with curiosity and openness. Allow yourself to fully experience the emotion. Recognize that they are a part of the human experience. I like to say, rather than getting critical, start getting curious. Then trust the process. Understand that emotions are transient and they will naturally pass. They'll never just stay around. Even someone who has an experience with depression, right? There are still moments in their day, their week, their month that they do not experience depression, right? And so we have to trust you. We have to trust that innate wisdom of your emotional self. And this trust empowers you to navigate the discomfort and emerge stronger on the other side. And so that is RIDE. So we have recognize, RIDE, and of course, recover. And so the final step of our transformative framework emphasizes the importance of self-care. After experiencing and riding through emotions, it's essential to engage in nurturing practices that support your well-being and facilitate recovery. Self-care provides the space and resources to rejuvenate and replenish your emotional reserves. Now, when we go back to the idea of a child, right? As parents, our job was to co-regulate with our children. I don't have children, but your job was to co-regulate with your children. And so when a child is dysregulated, you pick them up, you kind of help them learn that I could be in a distressed phase or a distressed place and I can calm down. And that's every time we do that, right? We're taking deep breaths, we're staying calm in ourselves, because again, if we're freaking out, they're doing more of that. And so we just by being there and the touch and the breath and it's okay and all of the things are helping teach that child that when they're in a distressed place, we can calm back down and become regulated. It's called co-regulation. We are being regulated, so then we regulate them, right? So as adults, no one's going to pick you up and like bounce you around, unfortunately. And so your job is to do that for yourself. And so first and foremost, be compassionate, right? Be kind to yourself and offer self-compassion after navigating those challenging emotions, right? We don't want to talk about what you did wrong, what you did. Just say, wow, like I just did that. That was great. I survived, right? Because you're going to survive every time you ride an emotion. I'm just going to let you know that. Practice self-care activities to promote self-soothing, relaxation, self-nurturing, and restore emotional balance. And of course, a part of that is creating more healthy coping skills. So if we're no longer wanting to use food as our coping skill, we have to create a new toolbox, if you will, of things that we can also use. That doesn't mean you're not going to grab for food ever again. It will happen again, I promise you. However, you will see it happen few far in between. When it does happen, you'll be more aware. Maybe you're even intentional with it. I have clients who are like, I'm going to have X food. I'm having a bad day. I'm telling you because I am making it public that I intend to do this. So if I intend to do something and I do it, am I in control or out of control? I'm in control, right? And because they've put it out to me, they're less likely. I've actually never had anyone have like a full-blown like emotional eating experience. They're very much intentional with their food. They eat it and we move on with our lives, right? There's no like hangover of shame or anything like that. And so I have created for you guys a whole list of self-care. I mean, honestly, you could ask, your Series and Alexas out where, for a list of self-care, but I did it for you. So we have physical and emotional. So a lot of these things you already know, but just in case you don't, engaging in regular exercise or physical activity, getting enough sleep and establishing a consistent sleep routine, practicing good hygiene and self-care routines. Every Sunday, I have like a little spa day. I do a mask on my hair. I do a mask on my face. It's so nice. That's probably why I felt weird this morning, because I didn't do that yesterday. So it's a really nice way to start my week. Yeah. Eating balanced and nutritious diet, taking breaks and incorporating relaxation techniques into your daily life, and regularly making sure you're okay. So what are some of these? I like to point out the relaxation techniques. One of the easiest things you can do, and you can do anywhere, is turning into your breath. There are several different ways to follow breathing, or several different breathing techniques. One of the ones that I love is the double inhale. So we inhale, we get to the top, and we inhale again. And then I learned that from the Huberman Lab, and he talks about that last inhale opens up the capillaries of the lungs even more to get even more oxygen to our bodies. And it's a very easy thing. Now I'm doing it very dramatically, but you could literally be sitting there and just, right, and let it out. Another thing I love is progressive muscle relaxation. And so this is where we tense the muscles of our body. So we start with our feet, we tense them for like 5 seconds, and we release. And just that tensing to release just makes it feel less tense, right? Less stress. And then we move our way up to our calf, to our quads, to our glutes, to our tummies, to our arms. I used to work with kids. Actually, we used to work as used to work in child crimes with the Phoenix PD as a therapist. And we did a lot of this because my clients were all child victims of crime. And so we had to teach them how to get through the big emotions and the scary things that happen to them, right? And so we would make funny things like, you have a butterfly on your nose, you gotta squash it, we used to do like, you have a jawbreaker in your mouth, you gotta blow it up. Now, obviously as adults, maybe we don't do that, maybe we do, but progressive muscle relaxation is a great one too. Again, practicing mindfulness and meditation, journaling your experience, write it down, get it out of your brain, get it on a piece of paper, finding wonderful hobbies that are helpful for you. I know a lot of my clients love knitting. I still haven't got like a sweater or anything though. I need to talk to them about that. Setting and maintaining healthy boundaries, and then of course, seeking counseling when needed. Let me just go through some more. So keeping the mind busy, having puzzles, or doing a game on your phone, working towards goals, maybe creating a vision board or something like that, right? Managing stress, again, through deep breathing and relaxation, taking mental breaks. I always tell my clients, I'm like, this is your emotional cup, right? And if we start getting down here, this is the point of no return. We're just completely, we're going to emotional eat down here. We're going to have decision fatigue down here, probably going to yell at someone down here. And so we have to keep replenishing this cup as we have, and you can't really see the straw, because you think about how many straws you have in your own cup, right? That are sucking the energy out of you. A lot of people think energy, they think like exercise, right? No, emotional energy is one thing. We have physical energy, which would be, that would be a part of movement, spiritual, social, career, all of that. And so filling that cup back up, nurturing relationships with friends, asking for support, setting aside time to be with your friends, establishing healthy boundaries, engaging acts of kindness, and then of course having a spiritual practice. This is a big one for you, especially if you are someone. It doesn't have to be a religious practice per se, but just that understanding that what I'm experiencing is true to me. It is true to where I'm at in this time and space, and that this is what I'm experiencing, and that's it, right? And so practicing that spiritual practice, practicing gratitude and mindfulness, and then again, setting boundaries as you need in work experience. I have one client, she literally won't say no to things. And then what happens is she tends to put herself on the back burner, and we're really working on pulling that back, because until she can begin to start saying no. And she did it for like a good week, and she's like, oh my gosh, things got done. I go, the world didn't end. You're okay. So some professional self-care. So that is it for me. I'll open it up for questions now, but then I also put in here where you can find me if you have any other questions.
Awesome. That information overload, so much good
I know.
information. I know I'm gonna have to go back through and watch it and reread screens and all of that good stuff. Awesome. And so,
Funny
yeah,
thing
this
is, we
is
literally could talk about it for like 2 more hours, you know?
right. I was like so ready for you to go off on another tangent on something else. And I'm like, okay, yes, we got to come back to this. Focus.
Mhm.
Awesome. So yeah, if anybody has any personal questions, yes, we have time for Q&A here, but if you have something that's, personal and you don't want the world to hear it, we understand. And so Christina was kind enough to share all of her connecting points where you can message her, find her, TikTok, Instagram, email, obviously. So before we get into the Q&A, thank you for sharing. This is fantastic. We have some people watching on Zoom. We have some people watching in the Facebook group. So now is a good time to post your questions. While we're waiting for those questions to come in, I have a few to kind of get the ball rolling. I know you mainly work with women, and you said, the husbands kind of trickle along. Do you find that mainly women struggle with emotional eating, or they kind of start, men and women struggle with it the same, just men are kind of, they tend to repress their emotions, or where do you see that?
No, I do believe, I mean, yes, in my case, I see a lot of women who struggle with emotional eating. However, I think it from a societal standpoint, we tend to normalize men eating in excess, and we tend to shame when women eat in excess. And so there's that kind of, macro, always get that wrong, like, negative like perception of it. And then we have our own negative perceptions of it. And so I do think men definitely turn to food. It's just they don't recognize it as a problem until someone like myself comes in and says, hey, like, I noticed that when you're fighting with your wife, like we're eating X, Y, and Z, like, let's talk about that more. And they're like, oh yeah, that's what I do all the time. And I'm like, okay, well, how do you feel afterwards? Like, and so it's really uncovering that. But in my experience, because women are, and I shouldn't invalidate men, because men are told to be tough. They're supposed to have those masculine traits, be in their power, be very assertive, but not be anything but that, right? So they have to suppress the sadness, the shame, the guilt. And then for women, we're supposed to be happy and smiling and perfect and all of those things. And so there are environments in both male and female experience that create the same outcomes that we talked about today. I just think for some men, they're just oblivious that it's an issue because we allow them to do it, if you will.
Yeah. You were talking about, things that people were said to, or said as kids, hey, put on a pretty face, or I'm thinking like, guys, hey, quit being a little girl, quit crying like a girl, man up.
Yeah.
And that I'm sure can be very triggering in some way for men.
Absolutely. And I feel that lately, we've definitely given men that experience or that opportunity to begin to grow in that area and begin to recognize what's going on with them. And some of the most powerful men, I don't like the word powerful, but like some of the most, I would say, well-rounded people I know, they are ones that are very open in regards to their emotional expression. And for some of them, this is a new thing, and so there's definitely, we minimize on both ends. It's just, we tend to see, I shouldn't say see one, but we tend to say one is more negative than the other.
Yeah. Well, we have a question here on Facebook from Marcus. Do you have coping mechanisms specifically for stress eating or feeling overwhelmed and turning to food? So specifically related to stress and overwhelm.
Yeah. The first thing we want to do, Marcus, is we want to, like I talked about our cup, right? We don't want to get to a place where the stress is so overwhelming that I've had people say like, I can't do anything else but turn to food. So one of my favorite things to do with people who tend to stress eat is do a check-in with themselves a couple times a day. Like, what am I feeling right now? Like, how am I, like, what's going on with me? Because what I tend to see people do, and if you want to comment on this, I'd love to hear your input, is they kind of put it off and put it off and put it off, and like work through the stress and go through the stress until the stress is so high that boom, we're right in that autopilot, right? We're right into that food. Whereas if I can let, it's like a balloon, right? And like the balloon spirals when we get to that very, very stressed place. But if I can let the air out of that balloon slowly, so I check in with myself in the morning, like I did in the shower today, I check in with myself at night, then think about that. The stress is probably not as intense. So something like taking a walk, something like the deep breathing work we talked about, something like taking a freaking shower, that was beautiful. That is enough to manage the stress when we compare it to when we allow it to compound. And now we need that hit of dopamine. We need that stronger thing, that drug. So I like to use that as those are two different things there. So allowing yourself to check in with yourself on a daily basis, sometimes twice daily, 3 times daily, self-caring for those small moments to eat, like let that stress out slowly. And that in itself tends to reduce stress eating because we're not getting to that overwhelming place. But a lot of the things we talked about today, so breath work, writing it down, exercise, getting outside. I like to think of just like small bits of like self-care because sometimes you can't go for a walk, right? Listening to a song that you like, playing, like getting into a good podcast, or even just like a comedy show, like just something that brings you that. Remember, what we're searching for is that high or that pleasurable experience. And so by filling your cup up with more of that and doing it slowly over time, you're less likely to turn to food because you've again let that stress out slowly rather than all at once.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of those things that you mentioned, I think different combinations work for different people. It's a matter of finding, okay, what works best for me? And maybe it's just one thing, maybe it's 14 things that you can kind of cycle through depending on the stressor. I know when I feel like that sense of overwhelm, I have to write it down, like almost like I get overwhelmed. I get stressed when I think I have a lot of things I have to get done. But when I write down a to-do list, I could take that step back and be like, okay, that's manageable. It's not really as much as I thought it was, and making a big deal in my head.
For sure.
And then
you bring up the point, like sometimes what worked for you one time isn't going to work for you the next time. And so having as many of those coping skills available to you is super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the breathing option as well. I haven't heard of you said the double inhale. I've done box breathing. I like box breathing, the 4 by 4 by 4. But
The breathing, and then for me, sun and like nature, just being outside. Sometimes it's just like taking my computer and sitting outside, just changing the environment is helpful. But really it all, at the beginning of the day, it starts with, am I aware enough that I'm getting stressed? And that for like Marcus, I think is going to be the more important thing. Once I can recognize that it's starting to come on, I can bring it back down. And then later in the day, if it's starting to come on, I can bring it back down. And however we do that, obviously we want to use adaptive coping skills to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Marcus said, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Another one that came to my mind, and we didn't really hit on it much, but perhaps you can give people resources. You mentioned trauma, whether physical, emotional, sexual trauma, that definitely plays a role in emotional eating for some people. What would be their best course of action if that is something that they've struggled with?
Yeah. Most of my clients have some sort of trauma, whether again it's emotional or the ones that struggle the most, it's like a sexual trauma. And first and foremost, when someone has a trauma that, it depends on the intensity and how their brains are perceiving that trauma, because I like to explain it this way. trauma, especially when we don't get an opportunity to process it in the moment, and or we're invalidated, we're told that didn't happen, we're not believed, whatever it is, the brain doesn't know what to do. It's like it's this file that's floating around trying to figure out what file cabinet it belongs in, but it doesn't belong in a file cabinet, right? And so the brain then is always trying to find where to file that thought. So I always say, if it looks like, sounds like, smells like, feels like that thing, the brain triggers and is like, is this that thing again? Because it also wants to protect itself. Our brain's job is to, protect ourselves from constant stress or adaptive stress. And so if somebody is having a very intense response to the look like, sounds like, smells like, feels like, they actually, we recommend, and I have several clients using this type of therapy. It's called EMDR. It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And EMDR has been shown in research to help you process emotional trauma and file that file away properly through what we call bilateral stimulation. Now, bilateral stimulation is basically using both sides of your body to open up both hemispheres of your brain. So remember we were kids and you used to say like, oh, if you touch this side of your body, it's accessing this side of your brain, and you touch this side of your body, access this side of your brain. At least they said that to me somewhere along the way. It uses either touch, right? So this bilateral touch. So when I was practicing as a clinician, there was these little like fuzzies. They don't shock you. They just go like kind of touch your hand. There's headphones that go beep, beep. And then there's actually where you can use your eyes to go back and forth. And what it does again is it's allowing you, and I explain it this way. The funny thing about EMDR is it's incredibly helpful for trauma victims. But no one's really figured out exactly how it works. So I'm just gonna throw it out there. This is how I explain it. It's almost using both sides of your body and both hemispheres of your brain to use both logic and reasoning and creating an environment to help process using both of those, because oftentimes we're only using one. Most people only use that emotional side of their brain, and that's why we get those intense feelings. I can tell you guys, if you do experience trauma and you think about the trauma today and it feels like we're there again, this is where I would refer you to go seeking a trauma therapist and doing some EMDR. Other people do go very logical, where they can tell you about their trauma without any, it's almost like they're reading a script, right? And so that too is not healthy. We want to have some feelings around it, right? But we want to know, like, that hurt me, I didn't like that, I'm okay now. And so EMDR is, for me, my go-to in regards to helping people with trauma. And then we're doing a lot of the stuff we talked about today too. So the day-to-day, the self-care, the compassion, being able to really sit through some of these emotions for the first time, because fear has been such a strong feeling for so long that fear, say I'm scared of public speaking, sometimes can even feel like that thing that happened to me, right? And so helping people to separate what is, real fear and what is perceived, and like helping them acknowledge that. But EMDR by far is my go-to for people who've experienced trauma, on top of the work that we do with the day-to-day stuff. I actually have, I think, 3 clients doing EMDR right now. So it's good stuff.
Okay. And that's with a licensed therapist, right?
It's with a licensed therapist who specializes. You have to go through, I think we did, you do 2, there's a whole thing, 2 weekends of training plus so many hours of EMDR. I'm still technically certified in it, but because I work with clients over state lines, I'm only licensed in the state of Arizona. So we, in our contract, we say, if there's if we feel that you need a higher level of care, meaning a therapist or trauma work, we will refer you and provide you with information on therapists that we recommend.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then another question, as we wait for more questions to come in, we do have just a few more minutes. So if there's no other questions, we'll kind of finish up, but I'll keep an eye out. You briefly kind of hit on kids. We talked about us being kids and perhaps having some emotional trauma, for lack of better words right now, when we were growing up and how we were raised and things like that with big feelings. Well, a lot of people that, we now have kids, right? We have little babies, we have kids that are grown up, young adults, that we want to help them have a good relationship with food, have a good relationship and emotional health. Do you have any pointers for how to help people achieve that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to separate that because obviously, with emotional regulation with children, with parents, it's that same idea of like, there's a reason why we tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. So everything we're talking about today to help you regulate yourself and show up for your child in the best way possible. You're not going to be perfect. Just spoiler alert, you're going to mess up, right? Like, often. But even then being like, you know what, mommy or daddy really had a big feeling there, and I pointed it towards you and you didn't deserve that. Like almost like checking yourself in front of your kid and being like, I'm so sorry. But just to go back, being able to emotionally take care of yourself first. Everything starts with you, right? It starts with you. I think of the hierarchy of self-care. It's me and my partner, if I have one, right? It's my partner and myself as parents. So this is relationship, parents, children. But we do this thing where we go like children first, our relationships over there, right? Our self-care is in the trash can, and so being able to regulate yourself first. Then when kids are, okay, we have to think of kids as being, like I said, vulnerable, spontaneous, defiant, valuable, right? They have needs, they have wants, they're dependent on you for a lot of those, right? And so really acknowledging their experience and being able to say like, wow, it sounds like you are, experiencing a big feeling. I like to use colors with kids. Like I am the aunt of like many, many nieces and nephews. I'm very thankful. And I'm the aunt that they call when everyone's having big feelings. And so it's, what color are we feeling right now? I'm feeling very red. Okay, where do we feel red in our bodies? And then like, I'll have them like hold on, or mom will come in and we'll like do some like somatic work, and we'll do some deep breathing, thinking about like blowing bubbles, taking that self-care list that I gave you guys and just making it kid friendly. You can go online too and look at like some ways to like make self-care, kind of gamify it and just make it fun, right? But again, it starts with you. It starts with saying, you know what, that was, mommy needs to take a little relaxation break. I'm gonna go and do, and like literally like calling it out as it is, even when you make mistakes. I think that's one of the best times for you to help your child say like, oh, like I'm going to mess up sometimes in this emotional experience called life, and I can acknowledge it and move on. And then again, giving them skills to help them work through it. On the food end of things, I tend to think about food and what it provides for us. So we talk about, protein for muscles, carbohydrates for energy, fat for make our brains healthy. And we talk about food in that way, having a lot of colors, right? And talking about how food makes us feel from a physical standpoint. Like when a kiddo has a tummy ache, right? Like, okay, maybe we ate a little bit too much of that thing because our tummies are telling us that. Because what mommy can eat of that thing and what kiddo can eat of that thing are very different. And so helping them learn how to listen to their bodies, right? Mm-hmm. Because the way I think about food is that there's 4 quadrants of food. And this is a good thing for parents. I haven't worked on like how I reframe it to be more kid friendly, but you have 4 quadrants of sustainable eating. You have highly nourishing, highly pleasurable foods. So for me, that's blueberries, strawberries, grapes, pineapples. Like I love those foods. They taste good to me and they're nourishing. So those are the foods we want to eat the most of. Our bodies feel good. We feel good emotionally. Those are the foods we want to eat more of. Then we have nourishing foods that aren't pleasurable. For me, that's like broccoli and kale, right? And what we want to do with those foods. And again, I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but as parents, I want you to start thinking about like, how can you be creative with this with your own kids. It's like, we need to figure out how to make those foods taste better, right? So I make a wonderful mac and cheese. It's got broccoli, bonza chickpea pasta, but I use some of the Laughing Cow pepper jack. Now, that might not be good for kids. Make it a little bit creamy, like it a little tasty, right? Salt, pepper, red pepper flakes. Now I'm eating my broccoli, I'm eating my chickpea pasta, but it's not like eating cardboard, right? So you have nourishing foods that are not pleasurable. Then we have pleasurable foods that are not nourishing. And so with those foods, especially with kiddos, those are the foods that they're going to want to overeat. And so we really want to tap into their physical feeling. Like, how's your belly feel after eating that? Oh, my belly feels good. I'm like, okay, great. Like, that's a good amount for you. Do you feel good? You know, did you enjoy it? Yeah, I enjoyed it. Your belly enjoyed it too. Cool. Like, that's a good amount, you know? And so the same is true for adults. Is like our pleasuring foods, we can still eat them. People think, I can't have that food. Yes, you can. You just have to figure out how to eat it in a portion size that doesn't cause physical or emotional damage. And then lastly, we have non-nourishing, non-pleasurable foods. For me, and people laugh at me all the time, these are like chips to me, because I think they're like, I'm not a chip person. Like, that was lackluster. Like, it's like a 1 second thing with chips, because people usually inhale them. But if you actually taste them for like 3 seconds, they're gross. Everyone on your Facebook's like, what are you talking about? That's just my experience, and everyone's going to have a different experience with these foods. We eat less of those foods, right? They don't provide us nourishment. They don't provide us pleasure. Like, they're just there. And again, you know, with kids, we'll have to figure out how to tweak this. But I think if we can think of it from that perspective and guide them and listening to their bodies, listening to how they feel, because you guys all know, especially when they become verbal, right? And they can understand, like, they do give themselves belly aches and it doesn't feel fun for them. And so using it as a learning experience and then teaching them about foods in a way that has nothing to do with good versus bad, has nothing to do with skinny or fat. And I mean, there's a whole nother topic on how to talk to your kids around body image, right? We don't want to make comments about our foods either. Y'all know when we were kids, my mom had like mom's food. Like, no, we all eat the same things, right? Like, my mom she'd have these like Snackwell cookies. I remember they were like fat-free cookies or something. And it was like, you can't eat those, Christina. And I'm like, well, why not? Mom's eating them. I want to eat one too, you know? And so making sure that we are demonstrating that balance in our eating as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, like you said, that's a whole nother topic. That's something that, we could go down a whole nother rabbit hole on.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, a couple people on Facebook are saying thank you for all of your valuable information. Again, we have your contact information here. Any last bits of advice as people start to kind of explore their emotions and get to a healthier place with their emotional eating? Any last advice here?
Yeah, it's something I usually share. I do webinars weekly, is this idea of creating new paths, right? And so for a lot of you, this path you've driven down over and over and over again for 30, 40, 50 years of your life. It's that path that you end up at the end and you're like, oh, I'm already home. However, that path is not safe anymore. There are potholes. There's just, you can't drive down it anymore. But when you look around, there's no other path. You have to recreate it. And so I imagine you're standing in this cornfield, right? And you have your path that you've driven down so long. And you basically have to go take your car and start plowing through that cornfield. And it's bumpy and it's uncomfortable and it feels scary, right? And you get to the end, you're like, all right, that wasn't too bad. Like, kind of sucked, but not too bad. And then you begin to drive down that path over and over again until that path becomes smooth, right? The interesting thing is your first path never went away. It may be overgrown, it may be harder to drive down. But now what we're doing is we've created the smoother path. We know it's safe, it feels more comfortable, we're more mindful, more aware driving down that path. And that's what we're doing here. And so this is the concept of neuroplasticity. This is the concept that we can recreate these things in our brains. And it's possible for us to create new paths. With that, though, takes consistency, it takes compassion, and it also takes awareness that I may turn towards my old path. I may even drive down it a couple of times. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong. That just means that this is a part of the process. I acknowledge it. Some clients will say, I turned my wheel and then I turned it back, right? And so just remembering it takes time, it takes practice, and it takes compassion. So be nice to yourself.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Again, if anybody has additional questions, or if you're watching the replay and you would like Christina to answer some of your questions, go ahead and contact her here. You can comment on the YouTube video or the Facebook Live. And what I will do is just point you towards Christina, because I am not qualified to answer some of these questions. But yes, awesome. Well, thank you all for coming. Give Christina a big thank you in the comments when you have a moment when you're watching the replay. And stay tuned for our announcement tomorrow. That is coming. Super exciting stuff. And we will talk to you all soon. Hey.